Isn't it cool to have a full team up here?
Yes.
You know? All five. I mean, I don't even have I usually have one of the communion tables, but I couldn't even steal a stand, because they're all being used, which is a good problem to have, right? Well, the scripture text for this morning's sermon can be found in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 5. Like I already said, but since this is a communion Sunday, all the kids, 4 to 11-ish, who I would normally call up and pray over, and you go downstairs, you're going to stay in service with us all together so we can take communion all together here in a little bit. So Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12 is where I'll be focusing on this morning. And this passage Matthew 5 marks the beginning of what is known as Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And the 12 verses that I'll be sharing from this morning are what's commonly known as the Beatitudes. So this should be familiar territory for a lot of you. And I'll attempt to explain a little bit both the significance of the mountain as well as just exactly what the word of Beatitude is. So if you found Matthew 5, I invite you to stand with me as we read God's Word all together this morning. So this is Matthew's Gospel. So Matthew's writing this, and this is what he says, verse 1 of chapter 5. On one day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and he sat down. And his disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. This is what he said: God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for it, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice or righteousness, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Lord God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Be seated. So take a little break. We're taking a little break from Acts this morning to revisit what is really one of the most fundamental and foundational teachings of Jesus, in which he explains just what a Christian should look like, how we may bear the name of Christ well. And I mentioned the continuing assignment of those note cards with a prayer that God has impressed upon you. When we ask the question, God, where are you working? Where would you have us come alongside? Or what are you stirring up in us that you would like us to be involved in? What passion are you stirring in us, both individually and collectively as a church? And kids, those of you who are in here who normally would be down in Sunday school, that includes you. So that question is for you this morning as well. Where are you seeing maybe God working and doing something, and you see something happening and you think, God's doing that. How can I get involved in that? Or what's God stirring up in me? What's a passion that I have in my life? How could God maybe use that passion to change me and to change others, to change the world around me? So that's for all of us. And so again, that basket is there. The note cards are there. There's a pen there. If you feel led to write something down as a prayer to God. So back to Matthew 5. So he goes up on a mountain, right? Man walks up a mountain. That's all I got. That's the beginning of a joke that I didn't finish. But Jesus walks up a mountain. And he goes with the crowds, they're going up there, and he goes up there to teach them. Well, okay, where is this mountain? Well, long story short, we don't know. We don't really know where this mountain is. If you go to Israel today, there is a mountain called the Mountain of Beatitudes. It's kind of on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee, somewhere between Capernaum and Gennesaret. And that Mount of Beatitudes has been remembered and commemorated as the site of this sermon here in Matthew 5 for 1,600 years. But there are other sites that have been suggested over the years as well. So we don't really know 100% where this mountain is that Jesus walked up and preached this sermon. Okay, so why go up a mountain in the first place? Why even bother going up a mountain at all? Well, traditionally, mountains have been places where people have felt closer to God over the millennia. The idea being something like this: the closer we are to the clouds and to the heavens, in many humans' minds, therefore, the closer I am to God. That's why in pretty much any pagan religion, you'll have what are known as high places, which are literally put on top of mountains and hillsides because they wanted to be closer to God. Now, even putting aside that kind of pagan human tendency to seek geographically high places, God has repeatedly chosen mountains as places to meet with his people. Noah's Ark settled. Where did it settle? I'm asking questions and you're free to answer. Where did Noah's Ark settle? On top of a mountain, Mount Ararat. And following the flood, and God made his promise with Noah and his family there. When God tested Abraham, it was on a mountain. It was on Mount Moriah. You actually know the name of that one. That God spoke to Abraham, and he told him to let his son Isaac go. He was testing him, go sacrifice your son, and then it was all a test, and let him go. But that was on a mountain, Mount Moriah. When God delivered the words of his covenant with the Hebrew people, it was on a mountain. It was on Mount Horeb. You know the name of that mountain too. And there on Mount Horeb, he spoke face to face with Moses, his servant. So there's significance in Jesus going up a mountain, going up a hillside to teach his people. Yeah.
What about was Satan tempting Jesus on the mountain?
He took him to a high place where he could see.
Was the mountain?
I remember if he took him onto a mountain or if he just took him
way up.
it took him way up high, and he also took him on the top of the temple. But yeah, he took him up high to say, here's all of the kingdoms of the world. They're all yours if you worship me. So that idea of you're way up high looking down on things. Yeah, same kind of mentality. And here in Matthew 5, this is really something of a second Mount Horeb experience. Mount Horeb, where Moses received the covenant again. Because Jesus is the second person in the Trinity, and he's walking and talking with his creation. And he's expanding upon the law and the covenant that was delivered to Moses. That's why he says, you've heard it said, and I say. If you read on in Matthew 5, that's how Jesus delivers things. You've heard it said this way in the law. Well, I'm saying this. I'm taking it up a notch, basically, is what he's doing. So hopefully that explains a little bit the significance of going up on a mountain or a hill. So what does this term beatitude mean? Essentially, it's a term of blessing, which is why Jesus begins each of his eight statements here in Matthew with the words, blessed are those, or God blesses those who do this or that. And one way I've come to understand it is that a beatitude is, and it's what I titled this, a beatitude is an attitude of being. It's a way of being. So, for example, my attitude of being poor in spirit is a blessing because when I am in that frame of mind, I'm more inclined to fully realize my need for God. So verse 3, Matthew 5, God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And the context here indicates spiritual exaltation rather than earthly happiness or earthly prosperity. And in the Hebrew, poor means both materially and physically poor, as well as God would, or the prophets would repeatedly refer to the faithful among God's people as the poor in spirit. So it's both physically and spiritually, mentally poor. The poor in spirit are those who have the heart of the poor, their same attitude. There's an awareness that we have no reason to hope in the mere physical provisions of this world. Instead, we're fully aware of our need for God. We know God is the only source to provide for us both physically in tangible ways that we can touch and see, and in spiritual ways. To those of us who have that mindset belongs the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says. And in the kingdom of heaven, what's happening? God's will is done perfectly and completely. When we realize that all we do is fully dependent on God, we're aware of His constant care, of His constant provision in our lives, and we walk fully in line with Him, with His will, and His will is done, and it's being acted upon on earth just as it is in heaven. So then we come down to the next two verses, 4 and 5. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And God blesses those who are humble or meek, for they will inherit the whole earth. What does it mean to mourn? What is mourning? To me, it means that we're truly in touch with pain and loss in this life. Our church body has experienced 3 deaths in the past 6 weeks. We, as a body, are in a season of mourning. We still are. We just had a Jerry Rogers service yesterday. And I want you to know that there are fellow Free Methodist churches that are praying for you, praying for us in this season. I've reached out to some of my friends, some of the other pastors in our region. They prayed for me individually, and they let me know, hey, I'm going to mention this to our church body, and we are going to be in prayer for all of you. So know that that's happening, and I hope you sense those prayers. We're in touch with the real feelings of loss. We aren't denying them. We're not pretending they're not there, putting on that fake happy face that everything's okay. Because it's not. Right? We're honest before God, and when we are honest before God in the midst of mourning, it says that He will bring us comfort. If we pretend that everything's okay and we keep that proverbial stiff upper lip, right, we miss out on the opportunity of being brought comfort from God and from His body. And then when it comes to humility or meekness, I've heard it said on more than one occasion that humility is not thinking less about yourself. It's not having a poor self-image, but it's thinking about yourself less. The focus is on other people. How can we make someone else's life better? How can we be a blessing to another person? In that humility and in that meekness is the idea of giving yourself away. Not being concerned with getting your own way or receiving anything at all. And in that, as we live with that attitude of being, we will see that in the end, we have inherited the whole world. In Matthew 11, in verses 29 and a few that follow there, Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy. It's easy to bear, and the burden that I give you is light." So, in that, Jesus is saying meekness isn't passive weakness. but it's strength that has been directed and is under control. Most of the time in this world, to take possession of anything requires personal strength, or requires power, the use of something that you have, maybe it's money or whatever, or it requires cleverness or a will to win. But Jesus says, instead of all that, yield. And instead of all that, submit and give away power. Consider others as more important than yourselves. And again, in the end, you will see that you have inherited the earth. The new earth that God has promised He's going to make anew, right? He promised that in Revelation 21. In verses 6 and 7, continuing on in Matthew 5, it says, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice or righteousness, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Hungering and thirsting after justice or righteousness, those words are really interchangeable. It means that those who do this see the presence of God and His kingdom as the most important thing in life. They have a desperate craving for what is right before God. And that craving is comparable to a starving person's craving for food. To see God's kingdom come fully and His will being done fully on earth, just as it is in heaven. That's hungering and thirsting for righteousness and justice. And then to be merciful is to see love set in motion and expressed in actions. Doing unto others, even when others have been cruel, doing unto them as you would have them do unto you, right? Jackie Robinson's birthday was this past Friday. Thomas Merton's was as well, and these are two of my kind of personal heroes. But Jackie Robinson has been a hero of mine for as long as I can remember. So much so that Kaylin's middle name is Robinson. Lindsay was okay with it, so he's Kaylin Robinson Martin. And if you know anything about Jackie Robinson, you know that even when he was pushed and goaded and deliberately thrown at and deliberately slid into with spikes high, he didn't retaliate. Branch Rickey was the owner of the Dodgers and the GM of the Dodgers at the time. And I don't know how many of you have seen the movie 42. But he's telling Jackie what he wants out of a player. And Jackie says, so you want somebody that's too weak to retaliate? And Branch Rickey says, no, I want somebody who's so strong they won't retaliate. That's what I want. And he responded, Jackie Robinson responded with mercy. He responded how he desired others to initiate, but they were never going to initiate. But he responded with mercy. So I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the kids' PBS show, Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum. I know my kids will, but this is why I know about it. Yeah. Well, there's this great episode with Jackie Robinson in it. And in the show, to kind of give you the premise of the show, of Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum, there's three little kids, and they must live in a city because there's a big museum that they always go to. But there's secret passageways into this secret museum that's, I guess, underground because they have to slide down a pole to get there. And there's secret passageways in the museum, and they go into the secret museum, and they travel through time. And they meet famous people as they travel through time, and they learn lessons, life lessons from these famous people. And the weird thing about this show is the people that they meet are always kid-sized, but they have adult attributes. So, yeah, Amelia thinks it's hilarious. So, like the Mark Twain episode, for example, he's little, like a kid, but he's wearing the iconic Mark Twain white suit, and he has white hair. And I can't remember if he has a beard or not, but yeah, he has a beard. So he's a little kid, but he's Mark Twain, he's a little kid. So it's pretty funny. So in the Jackie Robinson episode, they go and they meet little Jackie Robinson in Pasadena, California. That's where he grew up. And in that episode, he's shown being kind to a neighbor child. It's a white kid who's been very cruel to Jackie because of the color of his skin. And when I saw it, I thought, that's mercy on display right there. The way he is responding. And the way his mom tells him, no, I want you, I'm making cookies for all the kids in the neighborhood. I want you to invite all of the kids. Jackie says, do I have to invite the girl who's mean to me? She says, yeah. You got to invite her too. So that's mercy on display there. So carrying on. In Matthew 5, we have verses 8 and 9, where Jesus says, God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. And God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. So pure can mean, or it does mean unmixed with anything else. The pure of heart are completely devoted to the worship and the service of God and accept no compromises in that. When the soul's only desire is God and a person's will holds to this desire after God, then that person will indeed see God in everything. And then those who work for peace, those who are peacemaking individuals. Working for peace is different than keeping the peace. Working for peace or peacemaking takes concentrated effort. It includes listening well, and it will always affect changes in those who are involved in the peacemaking process. Whereas peacekeeping generally just keeps at bay some level of hostility and violence. It's just, let's all calm down. I don't really care about making peace between two hostile people. I just need you to stop. Well, it doesn't work towards changing anybody's perspective or working together. Whereas making peace is far more difficult and far more involved of a process. But Jesus has called us not to just keep at bay hostility and violence, but to actually come into the fray and try to make peace between two opposing sides. When we come to verse 10, Matthew 5 says, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And Jesus, he provides the interpretation of that verse in the next two. It says, God blesses you when people mock you, and when people persecute you, and lie about you, and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about that. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in this same way. So, that's super easy, right? That's incredibly hard. People are going to mock you, Jesus says. People are going to persecute you. They're going to lie about you. They're going to say evil things about you because of your relationship with me. But as we endure this, the kingdom of heaven is our inheritance. And this morning, I wanted to focus, like I said, on really a fundamental, a foundational teaching of Jesus. These things are what define us as his followers, these attitudes of being. Are we all right with not having much? And knowing that all we need and will receive is from God? Are we able to mourn and really feel loss? And not just the loss of people we love, but even to mourn the loss that has been brought on in this life because of our own personal sins. Do we truly mourn that we've sinned and broken relationship with God and with others because of maybe some of our actions? Do we embrace humility and meekness? Are we really hungering and thirsting after justice and righteousness, both in ourselves and in the world around us? Are we merciful? Are our hearts pure? Are we working for peace? Not just trying to keep things peaceful or not violent, but really working to create peace between broken people and a broken world. And how are you with being persecuted for Jesus? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Jesus says when you experience persecution because of your relationship with me. So as we come to the Lord's table this morning, I hope you'll look at and consider these 8 traits, these 8 attitudes of being for Christians. And I ask you this question, is there one that leaps out at you? And you know you need God to work with you in that area. If so, when we pause here in a moment, I invite you to pray. I invite you to confess sin if that needs to happen, and to ask God to meet with you and to have his way in you, in your heart, and in your life. So just take a moment right now to do that, to look over those 8 attributes, attitudes of being, and just let God speak to you. And in the moment when the time seems right, I'll lead us into communion.